Shalom, it's the 11th of September, and I just want to do a brief overview before the study tonight on Hebrews chapter 3. Now, yesterday I touched on the extension of the covenant. Today I just want to re-emphasize the importance of searching the scripture and how to search the scripture, and the techniques used to search the scripture. So that's one of the important things that we need to have in our toolkit if we want to study the Bible. Now, if you just read the Bible on face level, you are basically guided through the translator's interpretation of that verse, and sometimes it's toned with the doctrines of that translation house, or what they stand for, what their belief systems are. But if you go from a point of if you approach it from a point of view of just wanting to see what the scripture says, with the aim in understanding what the author of that book was trying to say, and ultimately what Yahweh wants to reveal. Now, in my studies doing the Torah cycle, I basically came across, and also when I did the Aleph Bet, is that scripture is foundational, and it's foundational steps, and the one step builds upon the other. Now, what do I mean by that? It means that when you lay the foundation with the first chapter, for example, in Hebrews, chapter 2 is a next step to the next thing, and chapter 3 is the next step that builds upon the previous two. So there's a storyline that connects throughout the chapters, and you need to identify the themes, because we're not interested in trying to build a doctrine. We're not interested in trying to prove something that we stand for. We just want to see what the author was trying to say, and I apply the technique which I used to study the Torah, and also when I studied the Aleph Bet, is the foundational steps of the one laying more information upon the other, with what you previously studied still in the back of your mind when you think about what's coming. So that's the premise of this study method. So, for example, when you go through the Torah cycle once, this is a larger cycle, you will get an understanding of the basic truth or history or whatever is conveyed through the scriptures. And basically on the surface level, you'll just get the storyline of, Adam and Eve in the beginning, creation, and then moving up to the point of the flood. And then the next one is Noah and the flood, and the next one is Abraham that's been called, and the following one is Moses, and everything in between just connects. So it's like a storyline in itself, and then it goes to Jacob, and then splits up into 12 tribes, and the 12 tribes end up into Jerusalem, eventually entering the promised land, and then it's the separation of the kingdom, the 3 tribes versus the 10, and the 10 moved north, and they were scattered under Jeroboam. So that in itself is found in Hebrews chapter 3. So from the beginning, and also chapter 3 refers to the beginning of all things. So we need to have in our minds, what was in the beginning? What was the intent of having humans in the first place? What upset that? What changed that? That was sin. And that's also one of the things that's popping up in chapter 3, is the sin that is causing an issue. And what is the resolution to the problem and the restoration process? And that's also what we find in chapter 3, as well as chapter 1 and 2, is basically the work of Mashiach. Now, the overarching storyline in Hebrews is the revelation of Yeshua the Mashiach. And that's what I said when I did the first introductory. It's the same as Revelation. The starting heading of Revelation is the revelation of Yeshua the Mashiach. That's what is being revealed. And the judgment that follows is a result of revealing the Mashiach, revealing him as what? So that we saw last time when we studied chapter 2. He was revealed as the prince, the commander of his armies, and that prince laid the foundation of the next step, which is the establishment of the kingdom. And that was revealed in chapter 1, just an introductory focus on what is to come, who Mashiach is the king, and also we saw that he is the groom and he has a bride. So moving into chapter 3, we see the house, which is basically part of the kingdom, because the kingdom is associated with the king, the land, the people, the house, and the government system. The house basically represents the household, and that points forward in time into Revelation, when we see the new Jerusalem coming down, the bride, adorned as the bride. So that's the household, which is the city, and the house of Yahweh coming down. So yet again, the establishment, the final establishment of the kingdom is the end that we long looking forward. And the beginning, from the point of view of chapter 3, is slavery, sin and bondage, where you come from. And then, as we will go through the study, you'll see the oasis, the places of rest, and people longing back to Egypt. And that was the rebellion in Exodus 17, and the psalm that the author of Hebrews quoted. So he lays the foundation of the same patterns that happen, and his audience are basically revealed to as traveling through the wilderness. And the wilderness is the place where you get the portable house of Yahweh, or the household, not the permanent. And we are currently, after the destruction of the second temple, we're in the time period of the desert again, of the wilderness, leading up to the permanent house being established, which is symbolized by the New Jerusalem. So that implies that we are in a tabernacle phase of the household, which is scattered all over the world. And that is the audience that the author of Hebrews is addressing. So that's just a very broad overview, looking from the beginning, sin, and then Egypt representing Mitzrayim, sin and bondage, and then the work of Mashiach that will lead to the New Jerusalem coming down, the household, the perfect household, and what we need to do during the wilderness time, the hope. Don't lose hope. Don't get drawn into sin. So we'll look at all of those things. So this is just a bit of an introduction for tonight's study. I hope you have a lovely day. I'll speak to you tonight. Shalom.